All right, so we're going to move into a game, a non-SEC game. At this point, Notre Dame and Michigan, and this is a tough one for me. We had this discussion about Shea Patterson earlier in the week. If y'all Michigan fans or Notre Dame fans are curious from an SEC take on what Shea Patterson is going to mean to this team, could mean to this team, check it out. We did a video last week. Lots of angry and not so angry Michigan fans there. I also want to remind y'all, we do discuss non-SEC games all the time. So if you like what we're talking about, please subscribe. Notre Dame fans actually liked a lot of our content last year and stuck with us for the whole season. So let's get into this game. Michigan and Notre Dame. There's some good and bad for Michigan that I've dug up, unearthed since the last discussion on Shea Patterson that I found a little bit alarming because I came into that video praising Michigan's defense, and I still maintain that they did more with less last year on defense. I felt like they were a year or two away from defensively being anything significant. Statistically, they were really good. One of the things that was sort of hidden, though, in their statistics was the fact that they played a lot of abysmal offenses. Cincinnati was ranked 99th, and I think the other six, so they played 7 teams 99th or worse in scoring offense. They only played 3 top 50 teams, so 3 teams better than Purdue offensively did this Michigan team face last year. So it hid a little bit of those numbers. I think they gave up 32, 33 points per game in those games against top 50 offenses, which is not good. But also, when you're constantly giving the other team short fields because your quarterback sucks, your offensive line sucks, and you're going 3 and out, your defense eventually is going to give up. So I'm not... Or going to break. I don't want to say give up. That's not fair. So I'm not going to really kill him for that. I do think that is a data point. I don't know how important that data point is, but when we're talking about Michigan's season and they're trading one of those horrible offenses, I think Florida was like 120th, 100 something last year offensively. They started the season with Florida. I think it was 33-17 against Florida. They're trading Florida offensively against this Michigan defense with Notre Dame offensively, who Notre Dame had some struggles, notably against Miami last year, but they also had some games where they really put it on some people. And I don't know if it was a scheme fit against the defenses they faced, but there were games where they really stepped it up. So it's definitely an upgrade any way you look at it. So when we go into this and we start discussing these two teams, for you, Josh, do these numbers scare you a little bit if you're a Michigan fan, if you're looking at the fact that maybe their defense wasn't that good last year, or was it really a good defense and these numbers are just numbers and they really don't mean anything?
I think personally, when I look at Michigan, the thing that really hits home to me is how disjointed their statistics were in terms of, their ability to have a productive efficiency defense and also have a pretty abysmal defense in terms of explosiveness and plays allowed. And what I mean by that is Michigan's defense, if you look at S&P Plus, which there's a lot of metrics out there, S&P Plus just happens to be a pretty solid, consistent one. Michigan's defense was first in the country in efficiency defense. But in ISO PPP, which is essentially a measure of explosiveness defensively, Michigan was 112th nationally. They were not the opposite of bend and break, right? They were extremely aggressive. They relied heavily on their front. Their safeties at times were suspect. The linebacking core, I think, is quite good. I know they're nationally heralded. That gives me a little bit of pause when you see the number that low. But I think the biggest thing is they probably ask the linebackers to do a lot more than you maybe should and put them in a lot of bad situations. They end up covering receivers and they can get burned. The flip side of that, when you're that aggressive defensively, when you put your guys in those kind of situations, what I think tends to happen is you shut down bad to average defenses, and when you play really great ones, that aggressiveness can really come back to bite you because they're able to exploit it, both not just because the talent they have, but probably more importantly, the way they execute at a high level gives them an advantage. Um, so that's kind of my thing with Michigan is I don't hold it against them that they had those pluses and minuses, but I think if you look at it in terms of a defense that was very good in an efficiency sense and probably not nearly as good in an explosiveness sense, I think that answers the question. If you look back at the Penn State game, that's the one where they give up 42 points. Well, that fits the narrative completely because Penn State was an extremely aggressive offense. That flaw that Michigan had, and explosiveness, get exploited by a team that throws the ball deep every play. And when they played some other teams, notably, Wisconsin or Ohio State, even those two games were losses. The defense still played at a high level because they're playing teams that were, from an offensive standpoint, really driven on short yardage, grind down the field. And in fact, they were probably going to beat Ohio State when Ohio State was running that spread offense because of how aggressive they were, how disruptive they were, up until the point that Ohio State made a quarterback change, started throwing down the field, and took advantage of that aggressiveness to get some points on the board and finally pull away in that win. So, yeah, I don't take it away from Michigan. I just think it's more an indication of how aggressive they were. And to a certain extent, I will say, off and on this season, I think it'll be the same thing. Most of the time, it's going to play out in their favor. But it does leave something that can be exploited if an offense is capable of exploiting it.
And did they have to be aggressive last year because they knew about their defense deficiencies on offense and they were trying to neutralize that a little bit and maybe make up for it? And if so, with having a little more capable quarterback, can they adjust their defensive scheme a little bit to accommodate that?
I think that's an interesting question. I would probably argue that they really, I don't think they did. I think this is something that they just do under their defensive coordinator. It was the same thing they did the year prior. They turned Jabril Peppers into a Heisman candidate by being extremely aggressive and kind of almost, I won't say they've pioneered the concept of having an aggressive nickel back. I think Tyrann Mathieu probably was the most high-profile guy that sparked that about 7 years ago. And we've seen it in a couple others, Florida State, for example. But that's just kind of the scheme they run. And actually, I think a few times it's actually hurt them last year. Penn State is a particularly good example where if they'd played a more standard defense, I think they would have been a lot more successful. Wisconsin, I think, is another good example because Wisconsin hit some big plays down the field that allowed them to win that game. And I think if Michigan had played them more straight up, they would have been better off. So I think it actually hurt them as much as it helped them. But when you play teams like Ohio State, when they're running that standard spread run offense, that aggressiveness and disruption is the way you stop that offense. And it can drive them backwards, which kind of leads into this matchup with Notre Dame.
For me, last year, Notre Dame did one of the things that we've been frustrated with Notre Dame for a lot of years in that they didn't really separate themselves from a lot of the middle of the pack teams. Like they'd put on a pretty good record, a 10-win season or the 2012 season where they beat a lot of teams that they didn't really throttle a lot of teams. And a lot of their schedule is the one good thing about Notre Dame is they play a name schedule, which almost always ensures their bottom feeders are still going to be like 6-win teams, 7-win teams. They're not going to play a lot of Oregon State 1-11 type teams or whatever. So that's always a good positive, but then that you see them struggle with some of these middling teams. Last year, 2019 loss to Georgia is not something to be ashamed of. So that was, in my opinion, it was a good start. We actually came away from that game really high on Notre Dame. And then they blast Michigan State. They blast Southern Cal. They blast NC State. This is not what we're used to from Notre Dame. And so in that regard, we were really flying high on these guys, and then they rolled out this just clunker against Miami. I don't know where it came from. I feel something in me. It's not fair to say because 41-8 is very decisive, but something in me says if they play that game 10 times, it's not like that every time. I don't know what happened there. I think it's a little bit of, you had a quarterback that just couldn't get it done and mentally kind of shut down in that game. But 38-20 to Stanford is also another one where really head scratcher because Stanford's offense sucked. Miami's offense last year kind of sucked too. I know They had a good record, but they struggled against some pretty bad defenses. 21-17. I know Notre Dame fans were really excited because they beat an SEC team, but y'all, I cannot begin to tell you, if you're a Notre Dame fan or even if you're a Michigan fan listening, LSU was trash last year, like especially offensively. And towards the end of the year, so at the beginning of the year when they lost to Troy and when they just got clobbered early in the year, I think it was at Mississippi State, they were struggling with missing some key players on the defensive side of the ball. They got those guys back. And then they had a clean record like we've seen from LSU before, but going into the end of the season, they were just kind of limping along. They weren't there motivated. And I mean, I'm not taking anything away from Notre Dame's win. They earned that win, and Ian Book had his kind of coming out party, but offensively they were bad. And Danny Etling, Darius Guice put up some decent numbers against Notre Dame. Didn't have a great game. Obviously held them to 17 points. But that's not, to me, that my takeaway from that wasn't that they had a great defensive performance against LSU. Are there some concerns for Notre Dame, long-winded, roundabout way to get back to 38 points to Stanford, 41 points to Miami? Are there concerns with Notre Dame's defense, especially with this Michigan offense that's going to have somebody at quarterback that can throw the ball downfield?
I kind of think there probably are. I mean, Notre Dame's defense, they were a good unit, but they weren't a great unit, and that's kind of the long and short of it. To your point, a lot of the offenses that played last year just frankly weren't very good. When they played some better ones, they struggled. And also to your point, we've talked about this a lot over the years, and Notre Dame is often the great example, and it's not really their fault because it's just of how a strong baseline schedule does not necessarily mean it's a great schedule in terms of elite teams for playoff contention. It's not their fault. It's just they're the poster child of it because they always have a strong baseline schedule. They're the team that always has 6 wins or 7 wins.
Yeah, go 30 seconds on the difference between how strength of schedule is calculated as it relates to making a bowl versus real elite schedules where you have teams on your schedule that have a chance of making the actual playoffs.
Right. So the Sagarin ratings, which are something a lot of people use, are calculated based off how difficult it is to win, to make a bowl game with a given schedule. And the reason for that is it's a different calculation if you want to say how hard is it to win 11 games versus how hard is it to win 6 games. If you had, Alabama's schedule frequently will have 3 just absolute pansies on the schedule, 3 bottom tier SEC teams, 3 elite teams, and 3 above average teams. Okay. And the 3 pansies and the 3 bottom level teams means it's really easy to get to 6 wins. And so in a Sagarin system where the Sagarin formula is designed to say how hard is it to get bowl eligible, in other words, how hard is it to get 6 wins, Alabama's schedule is really easy. An above average team would beat those 6 worst teams on Alabama's schedule. So Alabama's schedule SOS looks really rough. Notre Dame's schedule, where most of the teams are 7-8 win teams, an above average team is going to struggle to beat 6 of the 12 opponents on the regular season schedule. Their schedule ranks a lot higher. The problem is, that Alabama's schedule also includes those 3 top 15 teams. And if you looked at Notre Dame's schedule last year, Notre Dame played 1 team in S&P Plus's top 15. Alabama regularly plays 3 to 4 of such teams. And if you're talking about playoffs, you need to win 11 to 12 games. You can't afford 2 losses. And so a schedule that is easy to get, Alabama's schedule with 6 weak teams and 3 elite teams, that schedule is really easy to make a bowl. So it ranks really poorly in Sagarin. But it's really hard to go 11-1. And there's very few strength of schedules. And I think ESPN's FPI now incorporates one that ranked that schedule really high because it's a hard schedule to make a playoff in. Conversely, Notre Dame's schedule really, really hard if you want to make a bowl because you've got to be, again, Sagarin is basically how rank 1 to 130, how good do you have to be to win 6 games? Where are you the 30th best team, the 40th best team, etc. You got to be pretty high. But most team, if you're a top 5 team, most of the time when Notre Dame's schedule, about half those teams, The Boston colleges, North Carolinas, NC States, Wake Forests are not a major opponent, and it's a lot easier. Not to say their schedule is easy, particularly last year, but it's just a different calculation.
Yeah, and I think that's Notre Dame fans don't think we're killing your schedule because Notre Dame is one of the best in the country about scheduling. Obviously, they have the benefit of not being tied to a conference schedule, but what they don't do is go out and schedule a bunch of cupcakes because they can, just to ensure that they're in playoff contention or 10, 11 win season contention every year. They play a name schedule, which always means they're going to have that steady diet of at least 7-5 type teams. But they don't shy away from playing at Georgia, playing a Southern Cal, Stanford every year, had Miami last year. So I'm not killing them for that. It's just how we perceive tough schedules. Michigan's very good about this too. They're scheduling Florida's, they're scheduling Notre Dame's, teams out of conference that are really good to sort of mitigate that Rutgers-Maryland factor. So credit goes to them as well. I do want to say, since I have the platform, this is what we just explained, what Josh just explained, is why when y'all chirp about an SEC team, when y'all complain about an SEC team playing, for example, the Citadel, it doesn't matter one bit to an elite team, SEC or otherwise, if they play the Citadel or if they play a bottom feeder Power 5 team. Alabama will beat the Citadel or Mercer or whatever their one FCS school is on their schedule. They will beat them just as bad as they will beat any other. The same thing is going to happen. They're going to come out, be up 35-0 at the half, 35-7 at the half. They're going to rest their starters in the second half. I don't care if it's Ole Miss last year that they beat 66-3, Vanderbilt that they beat like 59-0. Like, these are Power 5 teams in their conference that they beat the crap out of. Alabama hasn't lost to an unranked team since 2007. Not one. So they don't struggle with these types of teams. Elite teams do not struggle with bottom feeders. So stop complaining about that. What you need to look at, if you want to complain about somebody's schedule, is what we talked about before. How do they do against middle-of-the-road teams? If you are an elite team, you blow out middle-of-the-road teams. You don't struggle with Pitt and BYU and, anyway. It's a long sidebar. Iowa State. That's a sidebar, but that's how you tell if someone is an elite team, is how they do against the 7 and 5s. They need to beat the 7 and 5s by 2-3 touchdowns. And most teams in the playoffs, not just SEC teams, most teams in the playoffs in general consistently do that. So it doesn't matter to them if they play Mercer or if they play Kansas or if they play Colorado. So anyway, so looking at this then, I'm really interested to see. I know there's not a whole lot of controversy around Ian Book playing or not being the starter after the performance he had against LSU. He's not the starter. They say he's ready to play if needed. Might his skill set, after we saw what happened in the Ohio State game last year against Michigan, against this defense, might his skill set lend itself a little more to being successful against this Michigan defense?
I think potentially. The one thing I will say from that, and I think it's true if you go back and watch the LSU game, he takes a lot of chances downfield. I think that would be advantageous given how aggressive Michigan is, because you want to take some shots and see if you can just catch him out of position, make a good ball, big ball deep. I think Notre Dame losing their big-time receivers, though, not having Equimania St. Brown is not going to help them in that category. It makes it a lot harder to win jump balls. I also think you have to kind of step back and realize Ian Book threw a really terrible interception in that game against LSU. He wasn't perfect. He just came out and he was aggressive. And if that's what you're missing, is that aggression, then I think it does hurt you. The quick trigger is something you want against an aggressive defense. I think my other concern, and this is maybe the final point on this, is Notre Dame is falling into the spread offense trap we discuss a lot. And it goes a little bit to the scheduling issue you mentioned a minute ago. If you have a guy like Wimbush against 9 teams out of the schedule, he's going to be fantastic. We saw this with Alabama with Jalen Hurts. That 9 games out of the schedule, he was a great quarterback. He set records for Alabama. Scored billions of touchdowns, had decent passing statistics, actually, in most of his games. The problem is that, that style of offense, that particularly college style of offense, for the same reason it doesn't translate to the pros, it doesn't translate against elite teams. And I think to a large extent, Notre Dame and Kelly are starting the guy that's going to win them 9 or 10 games this year. That when they play anybody that's not a top 15 team, he's clear and away going to be the best quarterback. My concern is he the guy that's going to beat the couple teams you're going to need to beat as Notre Dame if you want to play in the playoff? And to your point, I don't know if Book is really the answer. So that's part of the problem, because I think Book is a little more flawed, even though he played well in that one game and they needed some kind of spark. But I definitely don't think that having a guy that's a run-first player, which involves a lot of horizontal movement, which in my view plays really heavily into Michigan's hand as an aggressive attacking defense that lets them disrupt the style of offense, is going to really work well, because there's just not going to challenge the other team vertically the way you need to do to exploit the aggression that Michigan's going to have in this game.
All right, so real quick, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this because we did a video, Michigan fans, Notre Dame fans. If you want to see kind of us discuss, talking about my hands a lot right now, want to see us discuss Shea Patterson from an SEC perspective and his time at Ole Miss and what we think he can do in that Michigan offense. We had a debate because I was a little higher on Shea Patterson than my co-host here. But let's talk a little bit now that he's been named the starter. Let's talk about a little bit what he can bring to the table. There were some comments, and I like to always address the comments as much as I can. There were some comments that said we didn't talk a lot about the struggles at the offensive line for Michigan last year that really played into their passing woes. Talk a little bit about whether or not bringing a guy like Shea Patterson in versus Wilton Speight or O'Korn can either do in a positive sense if you still have a struggling offensive line to help sort of cover those warts, or could it potentially make things worse given Shea Patterson's skill set? What do you think?
Well, obviously, having issues in the offensive line isn't going to help you, right? I mean, I think that's true of everyone. But the question is does it help you or hurt you more if you got a guy like Patterson? I think his mobility has to be a positive if you're having a disruption in the backfield, just versus a guy that can't maybe escape the pocket as readily. Though I kind of note that, Speight may be a statue. I don't know that O'Korn really is. But with Patterson, and I think to a certain extent people probably took this maybe more extreme one way or the other, and I realize even looking back at it, it sounded a little more negative. Patterson's biggest issue is when he tries to model his game after a Manziel. When he feels like he needs to escape the pocket and make throws on the run, and it's really just that Patterson trusts himself to do things that he can't quite do, and I do think there is a really big impact on him and his performance with how well the offensive line plays and how comfortable he is sitting in the pocket and making throws. And the way Ole Miss's offense works, they put a tremendous amount of strain on the quarterback. Now they have a good offensive line actually at Ole Miss, and Greg Little is a pretty darn good left tackle. Was I think the number one offensive tackle in the country coming out of high school. It's easy to underestimate just how much talent they accrued because they had a lot of top 5 classes. But I do think with Patterson, my whole thing with him is he's either going to say, you're either going to look at him and you're going to say how or why. You're going to say, how did he make that play? Or you're going to say, why did he make that play? And the more you put pressure on him, the more he feels like he has to do something on his own outside the confines of the system, the worse he's going to be. And the more he can sit there comfortably, go through his progressions, take the plays in front of him, and I think the coaches are going to just try to drill into him that you don't have to make every play. The better he's going to be. Now, is he going to be an upgrade? Almost certainly from a talent perspective. But my guess with Patterson is, there's going to be at least one game this season that Patterson wins for Michigan that they wouldn't have been able to win last year. And there's going to be at least one game this season that Patterson's going to lose for them that they shouldn't have lost, or at least one that's going to put them in a position to lose that they shouldn't be in that position. So I don't know if that answers your question. I definitely think it's an upgrade overall. And, maybe that didn't come across, especially in terms of talent and what you're able to do with him. But my big thing to caution with Patterson is, I don't think Patterson, by any means has quite lived up to his recruiting ranking yet. And I imagine he's going to be a year away from being, if he turns into that kind of player, from actually getting there.
And I think he can, based on what I've seen. I think he can turn into that player, but I also agree that he's a year away. And I think I've said this sort of in passing in our video that I think he needs probably a year in a system with a good team, not just a good set of receivers and a decent offensive line, which he had. He had a couple of elite receivers, multiple NFL players at receiver, good offensive line, and he knew he had to score 40 points every game to have a prayer of winning because their defense was that bad. I think that's going to completely change him as a player, especially from the turnovers and trying to force things and trying to be Johnny Manziel, which he's not. I just think it's going to take some time to exercise those demons from Ole Miss, from having the pressure on you if you go 3 and out, if you have a turnover on a drive, that it's not the end of the world because your defense isn't automatically going to give up a touchdown. And that's going to take a little bit of time, I think, but I do think, based on what I've seen, that he can get there. I just don't think, because I think there's this perception, because Chad Kelly came in, set the world on fire, and before he got hurt was what we thought was a first round. We thought he was a first round quarterback, especially after that first year. And honestly, like, I think there was some of that expectation from Shea Patterson as well, and it didn't happen. He was unfairly compared to him, but I could see him being successful. It might take him 6 weeks, 8 weeks to really get there. Okay, so before we get into predictions and talking about, specifics, who would you say which team has more pressure on them in this game? In that, who can maybe recover more and easier from a loss in this game? Is it Notre Dame or Michigan, given their schedules?
Well, I definitely think Notre Dame has more pressure on them. I mean, they're starting out as a dark horse playoff contender. I think, Michigan is a borderline top 25 team in a lot of rankings. They don't have a lot of pressure to make the playoff. They're a team that can come out and shock the world, beat Notre Dame, or at least that would be the narrative. Well, on the other hand, Notre Dame kind of feels like, to a certain extent, that they had all the pieces last year and sort of blew it. And then, maybe this year they can turn it around. And they don't want to lose out of the gate and knock themselves out of contention.
And see, I would disagree with you there. We haven't disagreed much this year, but I think Michigan, looking at their schedule, we talked about this a little bit in the other video, they start with Notre Dame, but then all in a row they have Wisconsin, Michigan State, Penn State, and then finish a couple games later with Ohio State. The knock on Harbaugh has been sort of what we saw in the Mike Shula era at Alabama, in that he still needs that signature win or a series of momentum-building wins that he hasn't really been able to put his stamp on this Michigan team. So I think realistically, they're not a playoff contender this year. Realistically, they're probably not a 10-11 win team this year. But I think the expectations are there because of the hype generated with Shea Patterson and because they had the good defense last year and they feel like they're just going to pick it up. That if they lose against Notre Dame, they've already lost one of those games that's going to make their schedule really hard. So I think it's winnable for them. So I do agree there's pressure on Notre Dame, but they lost, like you said, they lost a ton of people from that team last year. The expectations are always high there, but we're getting to where Michigan is sort of the same way again, where those expectations are really high. And I think looking at their schedule, if they lose this game, coming off the season that they had last year that was a little bit of a sour taste in their mouth, they might start getting some negative momentum rolling as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would generally agree with all that. I think, I think it really just comes down to the fact that Michigan brought in Shea Patterson. The whole reason we did the video is we figured, one, a lot of people would be curious. It's kind of interesting that it's taken as hating on Shea Patterson. I mean, if we were truly SEC homers, right, we would be pumping up Shea Patterson and saying, you've never seen a quarterback like this. And if he did this in the SEC, he'd be doing double in the Big Ten. And we kind of said the opposite, right? So
Well, they said they were mad. We were mad because we lost him, and that we were butthurt. So, damned if you do, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. It's. I mean, very much the opposite. We were trying to say, look, Shea Patterson probably took advantage of a lot of weak teams, honestly, in the SEC. And if you go back and listen to our videos from last year, one of our big things going into last year's season from Ole Miss is that we were highly critical of Shea Patterson. We had a whole thing last year on how critical we were of Shea Patterson, and that we were skeptical of the hype that he had last year going to Ole Miss based off his numbers the year prior, where he struggled a little bit. And I said Michigan was, borderline top 25. Obviously they're not now. Now they're a top 15 team in the rankings, and that you can almost see where people put them in the season based off whether or not they thought Shea Patterson, whether they knew Shea Patterson was going to be on the team, whether or not they were going to start, how they view Shea Patterson. And the big reason we did that video is I think it's unrealistic to expect Shea Patterson to transform this team. He definitely gives them more confidence at quarterback, at least in terms of ability versus what they had. But Shea Patterson is a very raw guy. And, we keep saying the Manziel statements. There was an interview where he talked about how he really tries to pattern himself after Manziel and Aaron Rodgers. And Shea Patterson's biggest problem is he can't make those off-angle throws the way those guys can. That's not an insult. Of the guys I've ever seen, probably Matt Stafford, Aaron Rodgers, Johnny Manziel, and probably Patrick Mahomes are the only guys I've ever really been able to see that can make those throws at off angles and bad body positions the way they can make them. Those are all probably NFL starting quarterbacks or drug addicts, one or the other, right? But if he plays within his talent level, he is an NFL caliber quarterback. He's just got to learn what his skill set is and play to that rather than trying to be somebody he's not.
All right, so we like to do this. We did this a few times last year. I'd like to do it again. Before we talk about our score predictions, our actual score predictions, if Notre Dame comes out the winner, and we're looking at the headlines Sunday morning, Notre Dame beats Michigan, what's going to be the story there? What's going to be the advantage? Is it at quarterback? Is it defensively? What's that score look like, and what does the headline say?
If Notre Dame beats Michigan in this game, I can guarantee you the storyline is going to be big plays cost Michigan in Notre Dame victory.
And that's from the aggressive defense?
Both sides of the ball, really. Michigan's defense, again, last year, first in efficiency, 112th in ISO PPP. To have that kind of spread in terms of being able to win most downs and then being one of the absolute worst in the country in big plays allowed on the same defense is insane. And even though you have a spread sometimes, it's usually like first and 40th, because if you're good enough to be first in efficiency defense, you're pretty darn good. So you have to be hyper aggressive and putting yourself in some extremely rough situations to have that kind of thing where you are one of the absolute worst. So that's the thing that Notre Dame needs to exploit in this game, and they need Wimbush to be able to exploit it in a way that Notre Dame was sketchy last year off and on in being able to do so.
What's the score look like if Notre Dame is the winner?
I think if Notre Dame's the winner, Michigan's probably not going to score a lot of points either. So I would probably say something like probably like 28-10 would be if Notre Dame were to win the game.
All right, so what's the storyline if we wake up Sunday morning and we're reading how Michigan won the game, starting momentum, big momentum for 2018? What's the storyline and what's the score if Michigan's the winner?
I think if Michigan's the winner, it's because their aggressive defense didn't break. And the storyline is going to be something like, Michigan suffocates Notre Dame in their opener, and wins marquee victory. And I think the score there, probably even lower scoring. I mean, you're probably looking at something like 17-6 or 21-6, because if Michigan's suffocating Notre Dame, given that you have a new starting quarterback and a guy prone to mistakes, the smart play there by Harbaugh, and this kind of meshes with his personality, is going to be very conservative. They'll take a few deep shots on called plays and try to generate one or two touchdowns, which they would probably hit. And then other than that, try to keep things really conservative, watch Notre Dame sputter, and then grind on them until they can win. I mean, that is Harbaugh's MO, and that's also the way you play that game when your defense is suffocating the other team.
All right, so I'm going to let you go first this time with your prediction. What do you think the actual score is, and who you think is going to win the game?
My actual score is the latter. I like Michigan in this game, and I think the betting lines are about dead even. If sometimes I think Michigan's favored slightly, I think that's fair. I give a little bit more of an edge to Michigan, and I have Michigan by probably 7 to 10 points again, something like 17-6. I'm really concerned by Notre Dame sticking by Wimbush, running this style of offense, losing the receivers they did, going against a very good Michigan defense. I mean, Michigan's guys, Gary, when you've got guys like Gary and Solomon, 5-star defensive linemen, in the SEC we see this all the time. If you've got those kinds of players, they can really absolutely play havoc on a team that's a run first spread offense, and they can kind of shut them down. And then you combine that with the fact that Michigan has an excellent receiving core or linebacking core, led by Bush. I think Michigan has a very good chance of controlling this game with their front seven. And unless Wimbush comes out and is a better passer than we really saw with any consistency last year, I think Notre Dame's going to really struggle to move the ball. And then my guess is Patterson probably does hit one or two big plays. And I just mean one or two big plays that make you go, how did he do that? The how plays that really wow you, and I think those are more likely than the why plays. My whole criticism with Patterson is you got about a 66% shot of having him make you two big plays that win you the game, and you got about a 33% shot that he's going to throw a pick six that loses it for you.
All right, so my pick, I'm going higher scoring, and I'm picking Notre Dame. I'm going to go 27-21 Notre Dame, with the caveat that I think that what I said earlier, where Shea Patterson's got to exercise those demons, I think game one is too much to ask for him to completely shake off that pressure, that internal pressure as a quarterback, that he's got to lead to a team to a lot of points. So I think he's going to make mistakes in this game that cost them. I'm going to go 27-21 Notre Dame with either a defensive score or a severely short field because of a Shea Patterson mistake, with the caveat that by year's end or by that stretch of a really tough schedule, which starts in, let's see, 2018. What's that?
October 13th is the Wisconsin game that really starts it.
October 13th. So somewhere in that 3-game stretch, he's going to win a game for him. He's going to have enough under his belt, enough comfort level in this system that he's going to win one of those 3 games. But right now, I think the two teams are close enough that I'm going with experience at quarterback. Even though I don't think it's a good scheme fit like you talked about, I think they'll grind out enough and capitalize on mistakes. Give me 27-21 Notre Dame. Any more thoughts on this one?
Not really. I do think the game, much like we talked about earlier with Washington and Auburn, this game could go either way. I don't think either one of us is particularly confident. And a lot of that really comes down to the fact that both of us think Patterson is erratic. And he's erratic because his highs are so high and his lows can be so damaging. But I do have a feeling that Michigan is going to do as little as possible to lean on Patterson, and I don't think we're going to really see who he is outside of a couple plays until the end of the season. And if we do see Patterson being Patterson, it's probably not a great thing because he's probably not operating within this game.